Let's be real here. Say it, dig it, and analyze it. That's Deep Story. Thanks for tuning into Deep Story. I'm MPT. So, Matthew McConaughey, yeah, the alright guy, he's also the author of this wildly popular book called GreenLights. It's not just a Hollywood actor's vanity project, it's been topping bestseller lists for months. You know, usually when a celebrity writes a book, it's a big deal for about, a week. Then poof, gone. But not this one. GreenLights is crushing it on the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and Amazon. Heck, it even sold out on Amazon. Matthew had to go hunt down the last 2 copies in a Barnes & Noble in Salt Lake City. Yeah, even McConaughey has to deal with out of stock life. Man, it's ironic, isn't it? So, Matthew says he wants to talk about this book. Apparently, he's not the kind of guy who writes things down to remember them. No, he writes things down to forget them. I mean, what? Forget them? What kind of inception logic is this? But it makes sense when you think about it. The book is full of stories, some a little scattered, but packed with life lessons. Writing things down isn't about clinging to them, it's about setting them free. Deep, right? And Matthew, he's always been kind of a go with the flow guy. He's not sitting there planning, all right, from 2 to 3 p.m., I'm gonna write in my diary. Nope. Writing for him is more like a reflex than a routine. He carries a journal everywhere. I mean, literally everywhere. Dinner out, journals on the table. Now, thanks to smartphones, the guy's a 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, note-taking machine. He's jotting things down not to remember them, but to let them go. It's like decluttering his brain to make space for new ideas. Picture this, it's the middle of the night. He wakes up with a thought. Boom, out comes the notebook. You say something smart during a conversation, he's scribbling it down like, oh man, that's a keeper. And then he's got to reassure everyone, hey, I'm not writing down your flaws or anything. Just had an idea. Classic McConaughey move. That's the thing, if he doesn't write it down, he's stuck in this mental loop of, don't forget this, don't forget this. Ever had that feeling? It's like your brain's got a post, it notes stuck to the front of it. So Matthew writes it down, clears his mind, and then he's free to enjoy dinner, the conversation, or whatever's happening in the moment. Writing is his mental reset button. And about that book title, GreenLights. Yep, the cover has an actual green light on it, just in case you missed the memo. Here's the deal. If you drive at just the right speed, starting at the first light, you might hit all 17 green lights in a row. Matthew's done it twice in his whole life. Twice. That's the magic of GreenLights. It's about rhythm, flow, cruising through life without hitting the brakes. So, why call the book GreenLights? People who haven't read it are like, traffic metaphors now. But for Matthew, it's about those rare moments when everything lines up perfectly. And man, don't we all wish life came with a GPS that tells you how to hit every green light? Wouldn't that be nice? So, the green light, it's not just about traffic signals, alright? It's a metaphor. Green lights mean go. They're those smooth, easy moments in life where everything feels natural, like running barefoot on summer grass. They're freedom, affirmation, opportunity, hope. Who doesn't love a green light? It's life's way of saying, you've got this, keep moving. But, There are yellow lights and red lights too. The yellows slow you down, the reds make you stop. These are life's challenges, the obstacles, the moments that force you to pause and reflect. Nobody loves those, right? But here's the thing, they have their purpose. By confronting the yellows and reds, you actually prepare yourself for more green lights ahead. You find your rhythm. You figure out your groove. Matthew noticed this pattern flipping through 50 years of journals. Yeah, 50 years. He realized he'd been paving his own way, laying down the bricks for future green lights. How? By taking responsibility, making sacrifices today to gain freedom, success, and less stress tomorrow. It's like plan ahead now so you can vibe later. Need an example? Alright, here's one. Matthew preps the coffee machine at night, grounds in, filter ready, so when he wakes up, all he has to do is press a button. Bam! Fresh coffee. That's a green light he created for future Matthew. It's about being kind to your future self, showing a little love to tomorrow, you. Now, sometimes you can plan those green lights. Other times, they just show up out of nowhere like some cosmic freebie. You don't know why you got lucky at that exact moment, but hey, it's here. So, grab it. Make the most of it. And then there's the flip side. Those yellows and reds you didn't want. Later, when you look in life's rearview mirror, they start to make sense. Those challenges turn green. You see the lessons they taught you, the strength they gave you. It's like life's telling you, yeah, you hated it then, but you're better for it now. Funny how that works, huh? Matthew's buddy once asked him, so what do you do at a yellow light? That's a big question. Sometimes you slow down, let the crisis pass. Other times, though, you look at that so-called crisis and go, wait a second, is this even a big deal? You realize it's just a molehill, not a mountain. No need to slam the brakes. Sometimes you just hit the gas and say, nope, not slowing down for this one. That's a green light too. Deciding not to treat every yellow as a full stop. It's about knowing when to pump the brakes and when to floor it. Life's all about making those calls. So, GreenLights. What kind of book is it? It's whatever you want it to be. A parenting guide. Sure. A manual for kindness and reducing pain? Absolutely. A leadership book? You bet. Because if you can't see the green lights in your own life, how can you lead anyone else? You've got to have that vision for yourself first. Writing this book wasn't easy for Matthew. He's not a look-back guy. He's a do-it-and-move-on guy. But flipping through 50 years of journals, it scared him. Still, he knew it might reveal something meaningful. And let's be real, who wouldn't want to uncover the rhythm of their own life? You know, when Matthew started writing this book, he didn't expect it to blow up like it did. I mean, GreenLights has been translated into so many languages and is making this deeply personal impact on people's lives. Folks are taking these stories and turning them into tools, using them to find meaning in their own journeys. That's powerful. In Matthew's message, it's that everyone has the potential to grow, to be better, to understand others more deeply. Sure, you can have great leaders, amazing mentors, or a boss you admire. But guess what? None of them can do your work for you. You've got to lead yourself. Matthew likes to say, you can have a minister of culture, but you also have to be the minister of your own culture. Kind of hits you, right? We're all in charge of our own path. We've got to embrace that. The book is raw too. Matthew shares some deeply vulnerable stories, like about his upbringing and his parents' roller coaster of a relationship, married 3 times, divorced twice. It's messy, it's painful, but it's also full of lessons. Those stories resonate with people who are struggling because they're real. They don't sugarcoat anything, but they also offer hope and inspiration. One standout story is from a film called Scorpion Spring. It's about preparation, and it's one of those lessons that sticks with you. Picture this, it's the early 90s. Matthew had just wrapped a movie called Boys on the Side, where he played a very conservative character. Back then, he was hustling hard, going to audition after audition, sometimes getting callbacks but never landing the role. And every single time, he'd walk out thinking, man, I didn't give it my all. He was putting in like 85% effort and leaving with regrets. Then Scorpion Spring came along. It was a small gig, just 1 day of shooting, a minor role. No audition. They just said, hey, the part's yours. So Matthew decided to try something different. He went back to his roots, to that raw, intuitive approach to acting he'd started with. Back then, he'd spend weeks obsessing over even 3 lines of dialogue, digging deep into the character. He wanted to bring that energy back. Here's the setup. Matthew's playing a drug smuggler on the Texas-Mexico border who's planning to rob the coyotes, transporting his drugs. He shows up on set feeling ready. But right before they start shooting, the assistant hands him the script for the day. And it's not just a quick scene, it's 2 whole pages of dialogue in Spanish. Now, let me tell you, Matthew had taken 1 semester of Spanish in high school. That's it. He's looking at this 4-page monologue like, oh no, but he's already there, no turning back. So he asks for 12 minutes. That's all he thinks he needs. Short enough not to hold up production, but long enough to fake his way through. Except, 12 minutes wasn't nearly enough, not to memorize, not to calm his nerves. He's sweating bullets, literally. A cold drop of sweat rolls down his neck. They shoot the scene, and Matthew powers through, but he has no clue how it went. He doesn't say a word about being unprepared, but inside, he knows. He knows he could have done better. And that day, it taught him something huge. You have to be prepared to truly have freedom. You can't just wing it and hope for the best. If you want to show up and give it your all, you've got to do the work beforehand. After that, Matthew's entire mindset changed. He started approaching every role, every project, with total commitment, making sure he was always ready for whatever came his way. That's the thing about preparation. It's not just about doing the homework. It's about giving yourself the freedom to excel when it really matters. You're right, that was a priceless lesson. Preparation isn't just about getting the job done, it's about giving yourself the freedom to own the moment. That shift in mindset had a profound impact on Matthew's career and his life. The fear, discomfort, and sheer awkwardness of that experience on Scorpion Spring, it totally redefined how he approaches preparation. It's why, later, when bigger opportunities came knocking, he was ready to meet them head on. Take a time to kill. Initially, Matthew wasn't even offered the lead role of Jake Brigance. Nope, it was a smaller part. But by the time he walked into that meeting with Joel Schumacher, the director, he'd read the script cover to cover several times. and devoured the original novel. He knew Jake Braggins inside and out. He'd prepared arguments to convince Schumacher why he was the right guy for the lead. That preparation paid off, and Matthew got the role. Without the hard lesson from Scorpion Spring, he might not have put in the work, and that game-changing role might never have happened. And about that Spanish monologue from Scorpion Spring, did he manage to pull it off in those frantic 12 minutes? Well, let's just say it's a memory he's mostly erased. Matthew remembers speaking the lines, sure, but he guarantees it wasn't great Spanish. From that day on, he swore to himself, never again, never go into anything that unprepared. Speaking of whirlwind moments, Matthew also talks about how his life changed overnight from being just another guy on the street to a household name in less than 48 hours. Crazy, right? It all happened the weekend Dazed and Confused premiered. Friday night, the movie opens. Earlier that day, he's walking down the 3rd Street Promenade in Santa Monica. There are maybe 400 people milling around. Of those, 395 couldn't care less about him. 5 might glance his way, maybe a couple of girls think, oh, he's kinda cute, or some guy digs his shoes. That's it. Total anonymity. But then Friday night rolls around and Dazed and Confused hits the screens. By Saturday morning, the vibe has completely changed. Matthew walks the same street and suddenly half those 400 people are staring, calling his name, recognizing him. By Sunday, practically the whole crowd is glued to him. The transformation was unreal, like stepping into a tornado and coming out the other side as somebody else entirely. That whirlwind wasn't a one-off either. When A Time to Kill premiered, it was another rocket launch. Friday night, Matthew's grabbing a tuna sandwich like it's just any other day. He's still hustling, still facing rejection on 99 out of 100 scripts, clinging to that one, yes, with everything he's got. Then the movie drops and suddenly his world changes all over again. It's wild to think how quickly life can flip. One moment, you're just trying to make ends meet. The next, you're navigating the surreal reality of fame. And yet, it all ties back to preparation. Those breakthroughs. They wouldn't have meant a thing if Matthew hadn't done the work to be ready for them. And then came the A Time to Kill weekend. 48 hours after the premiere, Matthew's world flipped upside down. Monday morning, same old routine, he's back on Santa Monica's 3rd Street Promenade for his usual tuna sandwich. But this time, those 400 people. Now, 395 of them are staring at him, while only 5 couldn't care less. The script situation, oh, that did a full 182. 48 hours earlier, out of the 100 scripts Matthew wanted, 99 were no, and 1 was a hesitant, maybe now? Suddenly, it's 99 scripts screaming, please, Matthew, take this role. But with all that opportunity, problem, which one do you choose? 2 days earlier, he'd have killed for a single chance. Now, he's drowning in options. It's overwhelming, right? This sudden overload of choices wasn't just exciting, it was disorienting. And that weekend taught him something else. Chance encounters with strangers, the pure, unfiltered kind, became almost non-existent. Before all this, a random meeting might include casual chatter, maybe someone asking about his dog after hearing it bark in the background. No big deal. But after that weekend, the conversations changed. Out of nowhere, a stranger might stop him and say, I'm so sorry about Miss Hudd, and he'd freeze. First, he'd think, Wait, who are you? Then, how do you even know I have a dog? And finally, how do you know my dog, Miss Hard, is battling cancer? The world suddenly felt like it had an open file on him. It wasn't that people were being mean. It was just surreal. Everyone seemed to have a piece of his life story, but those pieces didn't add up to the whole picture. The intimacy of true stranger to stranger connection had vanished. It was unsettling. That realization hit hard. Matthew felt like he needed to regain control before this whirlwind could sweep him off track. So, he did something bold. He stepped away from the spotlight entirely. First, he went to a monastery. Then he took off to Peru for a solo hiking trip. Why Peru? Partly because of a dream, but mostly because it was the perfect place to disappear. No electricity, no one who recognized him, not even a common language to rely on. It gave Matthew the quiet he desperately needed, the chance to finally hear his own thoughts again. That trip was about finding his internal compass, recalibrating his sense of self. Hollywood had gone from ignoring him to idolizing him overnight, but neither extreme felt real. He needed time to figure out his priorities, to decide what mattered without letting the noise dictate his choices. And you know what? That kind of solitude is liberating. When you step away, whether it's to hike through Peru, spend time in a monastery, or even just sit quietly for a few minutes, it shifts your perspective. It takes the weight off your shoulders, turning it into something manageable. Matthew compares it to laying everything out on a table. Instead of feeling buried under a towering pile of stress, you get to spread things out, examine them piece by piece. Suddenly, the chaos becomes clarity. Responsibilities don't feel as heavy when you can see them for what they are, tasks to tackle one at a time, not a single, suffocating mass. Sometimes, all you need is a little distance to remind yourself of what's truly important. There's a section in the book where Matthew talks about the importance of gratitude, something his parents instilled in him from a young age. It's a lesson that stuck, even through his wildest adventures. Take the time when he first moved to Hollywood. For example, he had just $2,000 to his name and was crashing on a friend's couch, literally living the starving artist cliché. One night at dinner, after about 2.5 weeks in town, he decided to press his friend Don for help. "Don," he said, "I need you to set me up with a meeting with an agent. I need it now." He was fired up, yelling and venting all his frustration. And Don, he just calmly told Matthew, "If Hollywood smells bad to you, then get out. Don't stick around waiting for some agent. Go find a job, any job, somewhere else." That hit him hard. It wasn't what he wanted to hear, but he knew it was true. So instead of chasing agents, he and a few friends scraped together what little cash they had, bought economy tickets to Amsterdam, and said, "Let's go." The dream: ride motorcycles across Europe. In Rosenheim, Germany, they stumbled upon this beautiful motorcycle shop and met the owner, John, who was there with his wife. Matthew explained their dream of riding through Europe. John showed them these gorgeous brand new bikes. Of course, they were way out of budget. Matthew said, "This is amazing, but how much?" John told him the bikes would cost around $12,000 to $15,000 each. Matthew laughed and said, "Whoa, no chance. We don't even have one $200. Do you have any old bikes we could borrow?" John looked at them for a moment and then said, "You know, When I was your age, I rode across Europe. It was one of the best experiences of my life. I don't think I'd be who I am today if I hadn't done it. So, here's the deal. You're taking these bikes. Matthew protested, saying, I can't. I don't even have a tenth of what you're asking. John's wife wasn't thrilled about this either, but John insisted. Finally, they settled on a deal, $800 and proof of their return flight tickets as insurance. John rolled out the bikes. For 3 weeks, Matthew and his friends lived the dream, riding through Europe. But then, about 2.5 weeks in, Rory, one of his friends, crashed his Ducati at 100 miles per hour on the highway. The bike completely totaled. Rory was lucky. He walked away with just a few scrapes and spent a night in the ER, but the bike was done for. Matthew called John from Italy. Nervously, he explained what had happened. John's first question wasn't about the bike's condition. He asked, Are you okay? Is Rory okay? Matthew told him they were fine. Then John said, All right, I'll be there tomorrow at 2 p.m. The next day, Matthew waited in a field where the accident had happened, expecting a tow truck to haul away the wrecked bike. Instead, John himself showed up. He got out of his truck, walked to the back, and started unloading something. To Matthew's surprise, it wasn't just a tow for the damaged bike. John had brought another brand new Ducati, the exact same model Rory had totaled. Matthew and his friends were stunned. Wow, they shouted. John unloaded the new bike, then quietly loaded up the wrecked one. No lectures, no guilt trips, just a simple act of generosity. That moment, it wasn't just about getting back on the road. It was about recognizing the power of gratitude and how kindness can ripple through lives. That trip and John's incredible generosity taught Matthew that gratitude isn't just a passive feeling. It's an active choice, a way of living. And when you show gratitude for what you have, the world has a way of opening doors you didn't even know were there. Before John left, he simply told Matthew and his friends, keep riding, keep riding. You were meant to enjoy this trip. I'm just glad you're all okay. Take care. And that's exactly what they did. They continued their journey, making it one of the most unforgettable experiences of their lives. It wasn't just about the adventure. It was about the bond they built. Even today, the friendships forged on that trip remain some of the closest Matthew has ever had. When Matthew returned to Hollywood, he didn't rush into finding an agent or chasing auditions. He didn't feel the need for Hollywood's approval to validate his worth. Instead, he took his time. About a month later, he was back on Don Phillips' couch, the same friend who told him, get out of here. A few days later, they were having dinner again. Out of nowhere, Don looked at him and said, You're ready. Ready for what? Matthew asked. Don replied, Tomorrow morning, you've got a meeting with William Morris. You're ready to join this agency because now you want it. Remember that. We'll go to the meeting together. The next day, Matthew walked into the meeting completely relaxed. No desperation, no pressure to prove himself, just confidence and authenticity. He wasn't begging to be signed. He was simply showing up. By the end of the meeting, they signed him on the spot. From there, things took off. Matthew booked his first 2 auditions, officially breaking into Hollywood. That Ducati experience stuck with him, though. It shaped how he approaches life, especially as a father and a partner. As a dad, Matthew has learned how to support his kids' dreams while helping them grow. He's got 3 children, and he's intentional about not handing them everything they want on a silver platter. Sometimes, what they think they want isn't what they truly need, it's just a fleeting desire. But when they show genuine passion and effort, when they work for something, Matthew wants to be there to back them up wholeheartedly. John didn't just see 3 broke kids in his shop, he saw their dreams. He saw their youth, their hope, and the bond they shared. To John, the cost of a motorcycle wasn't about money. It was about the experience Matthew and his friends would gain. John's generosity wasn't transactional, it was transformative. He gave them a dream and taught Matthew the value of giving others opportunities. Now, as a parent, Matthew strives to do the same. He doesn't just hand his kids the fish, he gives them fishing rod and encourages them to learn the skills they'll need to succeed. John didn't just lend Matthew a fishing rod, he provided the entire journey, showing that sometimes the greatest gift is a chance. And people, Matthew thinks we spend way too much time worrying about the wrong things. Especially yesterday. We let our past mistakes, regrets, and doubts weigh us down. But the truth is, yesterday's gone. You can't change it. All you can do is take the lessons it gave you and keep moving forward. One of the most important lessons Matthew's learned in life, there are plenty, but here's one he treasures the most. It came from his great-grandfather during a college spring break visit. His great-grandfather was about 95 at the time, and he said something that has stuck with Matthew forever. In my life, I've had thousands of crises. Most of them never happened. Isn't that just beautiful? Matthew thought so too. It's such a simple truth, but it's profound. We spend so much energy worrying about things that might go wrong, but so often, those fears never materialize. And as Matthew sees it, this lesson extends beyond personal growth. It's a constructive idea for us as a society. A little forgiveness, a bit of humor, those can be transformative. Humor doesn't deny a crisis, it can actually unlock it, loosen the knots of conflict, and start the healing process. When in doubt, tell a joke. Make someone laugh. It's a default emotion that can bridge divides and bring people together. That philosophy reminds Matthew of his mom. Early in his book, he shares a story about her relationship with worry. His mom used to carry a lot of anxieties to bed at night, but by morning, she was a different person. Now, his mom's approach to life is something else. She's almost 90 now, sharp as a tack, healthy as can be, and completely stress-free. A few years ago, Matthew asked her, "Mom, when you go to bed at night, do you think about regrets? Do you make mental lists of what you didn't do well, or what you like to fix or improve?" Her answer, "Oh, honey, every night I make a mental list. Usually there are 25 things I regret, things I wish I'd done better." Matthew said, "Okay." Then she added, "But darling, the thing is, by the time I wake up in the morning, I've forgotten them all." That's it. That's her secret. Acknowledge the regrets, but don't carry them. Let them go. Matthew's storytelling reflects this beautifully. GreenLights isn't just a book. It's a masterclass in being authentic, in sharing life lessons through the lens of humor, humility, and humanity. He's a natural storyteller, and that's what makes the book such a gem. One of the biggest lies Matthew was taught early in life, something he later realized wasn't true, came from a question he asked as a kid in kindergarten. He was in Texas, staring up at a cloud. You know how clouds can take on shapes and forms. Well, little Matthew was curious. He asked his teacher, Mr. Mayer, how big is that cloud? Is it as big as the world? Mr. Mayer replied, Yes, Matthew, that cloud is as big as the world. Now, what does a kid do with that? In Matthew's mind, the cloud's vastness reshaped his understanding of what's possible and what's not. He thought, well, if that cloud is as big as the world, it's way too far away to ever reach. And just like that, his dreams shifted. Instead of aspiring to be an astronaut, which felt impossibly out of reach, he decided it was better to be a sailor, something more grounded, more attainable. You see, Matthew had already pieced together some basic geography. He knew it took 15 hours to drive to Florida for a weekend trip, and on a map, Florida was just a tiny dot on a massive globe. So, if this cloud stretched across the entire world, yeah, that's way too far. Then came his first flight on a jet plane. Within the first 5 minutes after takeoff, they were flying through the clouds. And Matthew's mind went, hold up. If that cloud is that far away, but we just reached it in 5 minutes, this plane must be flying at, like, 10 billion miles per hour. But of course, it wasn't. That's when he started realizing maybe Mr. Mayer wasn't exactly telling the truth. For a while, he felt a little cheated. Dang it, Mr. Mayer, why'd you tell me that lie? But over time, Matthew began to see the beauty in it. That little lie taught him an early lesson. Focus on what's in front of you. Deal with what's immediate, what's tangible. Even if the journey seems repetitive or familiar, every time you take it, it's different. A road you've walked before feels new when you approach it from another angle, in another moment. That cloud as big as the world idea sparked Matthew's imagination. It nudged him to keep his focus on what he could touch and reach while still dreaming big. Today, whether he's in his backyard, across the street, in another state, country, or on the other side of the planet, Matthew sees beauty, creativity, opportunity, and possibility everywhere. So, while the cloud wasn't bigger than the world and Mr. Mayer's truth wasn't factually correct, it planted a seed. It influenced Matthew's perspective early on and continues to shape the way he sees life. And really, that's more than enough. Here's a lie Matthew never even noticed until much later in life. You know, parents teach you all kinds of things. Most of the time, they're trying to impart lessons that'll stick with you forever. But sometimes, they teach you something without even realizing it. Flashback to 1977. Matthew was 8 years old, competing in the Little Mr. Texas contest. Picture this, he's riding a horse, answering questions about agriculture and ranching, tossing out polite yes, sir, and yes, ma'am responses, and nodding like a little cowboy politician. Next thing he knows, someone's handing him a trophy. Snap, snap, photos are taken. Matthew heads home, where his mom proudly puts that photo up in the kitchen. Every single morning, as he's grabbing breakfast, she points at it and says, "Look at you, there you are. You're little Mr. Texas, Matthew. That's who you are." And this wasn't a one, no pepser. From 1977 to 1988, when Matthew graduated high school, every single morning he saw that photo and heard his mom's voice reinforcing it. "You're little Mr. Texas." A fast forward to 2018, Matthew's going through old journals while working on GreenLights. He stumbles across that same photo, him as a kid, holding the trophy. But this time, something catches his eye. He zooms in on the engraving, and guess what it says? Runner-up. Can you imagine the moment? For over 40 years, Matthew thought he was the winner. Every morning for over a decade, his mom had proudly told him he was little Mr. Texas. And technically, he wasn't. But here's the kicker, if Matthew had grown up thinking he was just the runner-up, would he have had the same life? Would he have the same confidence, the same drive? He doesn't know. Sometimes a little miscommunication or a well-intentioned mistake can have a positive impact. That photo, that mantra, that good lie, it shaped how Matthew saw himself and what he believed he could achieve. Turns out, a small trophy with a big story behind it can make all the difference.